I don't know if Matt had to do that. Okay. No.
Let me switch to my screen.
Somebody's talking.
Thinking anyone who was going to call my cell has, so I can mute that now. So we've just closed over. I don't think there's enough people that we need to worry too much about bothering. And that way we can stop touching that door handle.
I think anybody's here.
Yeah, I think
Oh, Scott might be in the store.
yeah, but he keeps his door closed. The door's been closed since I got in. So.
Yeah.
Just close all my extraneous applications here. Try to avoid some of the pop-ups that happen. Check that. Showing this. So one person is waiting in the lobby. How do I on here admit that person? Admit all. I can do it here. There.
Are you good?
Yep.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi,
So,
this is Jason Goodman.
I turned it down on here.
So I just got booted out.
We're looking at your midsection.
What?
We're looking at your midsection.
Oh, God.
Walk in front of the camera. Yeah, on this side. Perfect.
I was gonna say, yeah, we have a hand signal. We can't really have a hand signal because they'll see us.
I can't.
And we can't, yeah, we could keep it low.
Are massive. Why am I forcing it?
Is that what I'm gonna do?
Hi, Diane.
Hi there, how are you?
All of a sudden you popped up. Why is it meant home not coming up anymore?
I had to turn my video on. That was kind of odd.
You shouldn't have to keep it on if you'd rather not.
Yeah, it's up to you.
Doesn't matter.
Although if you raise a question, it's nice to see your smiling face.
Okay, deal. Are other people on?
I
Yes,
think we've got
quite a few.
most folks on. Honestly, we've got quite a group. How many people do we have? +9, so we've got 13 people connected.
All
I
right.
know some people are connected twice because they're one by phone and one by computer, but
Hi, Lonnie is here, if you can hear me.
Hi,
yeah,
Lonnie.
We can. Okay.
welcome.
Awesome.
Yes.
Do we have Jason?
Not that I saw yet.
Jason appears to be on the phone.
Sure is.
Oh. Now he is.
Oh, nice.
Hi, this is Jason Stuffle.
Hi, Jason.
Hey. We have JC on. Yeah.
Hello.
Oh, there he is.
Hi, Jason.
Ah, it works. Well, I don't have video, but maybe this will work. There we go.
Drew, I'm telling you, I'm gonna go over there and move that camera so it's pointing just. Drew's hiding just out of care.
Strategically position myself so I can just wave as needed.
Just out of
You'll
view.
either get a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or if you miss on the comments. Generally, this thing will track to where it's seeing motion, which is an interesting feature.
Hey, there's Jason. Hello, we see you now.
Hey, I figured it out.
Nicely done.
Yeah, we're all getting well versed in these various video conferencing platforms.
Oh, we're gonna be experts.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Noted.
Yeah. Are you at home?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Socially isolated.
Socially distancing?
With a little one crawling all around you all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're alternating.
I'm guessing you weren't painting your house when you said you had to go and do some painting when we spoke yesterday. Or whatever
I
that was.
realized I should have offered some clarification there. No, I was painting with brushes and
I thought you might be.
yep,
Very nice.
working the color palette.
I've had a 12-year-old sharing my office with me, and she likes to sing songs from either Zombies 2 or Frozen 2. So as she's doing her online learning, she's singing. I'm getting entertainment in the office this week, so
There you go.
it could be worse.
Yeah.
At least she's happy, at least she's in a good mood, which at 12 sometimes is more than you can expect.
Right.
Well, we are at the
Yeah, we're at the
6 o'clock
6
mark.
o'clock mark.
Looks like we got about 15 folks.
Yeah, so, yeah, we have about 15 people online. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, excellent. Some of you are muted, whether you chose that or whether it's the default when you connected. So you might want to just check to make sure you can unmute yourself and say hello. And then what we'll probably say is during the, when you don't have something to add or a question, we'll have you mute so that we don't get a lot of background noise. I know a lot of us have little people with us and, you know, families are moving around us. So we'll want to mute when we don't have something to say.
This is Ashley Bond. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Ashley, hello.
Thank you.
This is Marshall Distel from CCRPC.
Hey, Marshall.
Hey, Marshall.
And this is Eleni Churchill from CCRPC.
Hey, Eleni.
Hi.
Excellent. So if everybody, some of the other names I see on there have already said hello when they were logging on. If there's anyone who cannot, actually, Drew, do you mind connecting just in case somebody IMs you a message?
Oh, to the meeting?
Yeah. So,
Like, What?
sorry? Okay, Drew is also going to log on. So in the event that you have trouble or you're trying to say something, you don't know how to unmute yourself or something else, it should pop up on Drew's screen that there's a, you know, a way to, that you can add a message and we can try to help you troubleshoot. But otherwise, hopefully folks can hear us and see us, although not very well. Right now, you should see more of the slides than of us, but if we need to, we can switch back and forth between seeing slides and seeing people's faces. And you can turn on your own camera if you want to make it more of a conversation if you do have a question or want to say hello. I do need to inform you all that this is being recorded. That is something that we have to disclose. It will be recorded and it will be available on the website. Did I hear a question? All right. If not, I guess if you could mute yourself on your computer. We have a few folks that aren't muted. If you don't mind muting, just so we don't get background noise, that would be super.
Hey, Jen?
Yes.
I would just offer that I think you guys went a little dark on the video screen, mainly because of the windows behind you. Just the light contrast, I think, might be throwing things off.
There we go. We'll see if we can remedy that right now. Turn on the lights in here.
And this is Ashley. I don't see any of your slides in the background.
You just see our faces?
Yes, in a small window.
That is strange.
Is anybody else having issues with the content showing up?
Do the rest of you see the slides?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay.
I can see the slides.
I'm not sure why that would be. Let's see if we can troubleshoot that.
Matt from IT, if all else fails, if you try leaving and rejoining the meeting, it might jumpstart it.
Okay, that's what I was just gonna suggest I would try. Okay, I will do that, and if not, I will come in, I will see your faces, and I will follow along with the slides that you emailed earlier.
Perfect, thank you, I appreciate
Perfect, yeah,
that.
and we'll just explicitly mention if you're unable to see it, we'll say which slide we're on, yeah.
Great. So maybe while she is reconnecting, we could get started and just, run through the agenda really quickly. We can reintroduce, it actually looks like we have most of the advisory committee here. We will then run through where we stand on the purpose and need. We've gotten a lot of feedback. We appreciate that. We got a ton of feedback. And so we'll review kind of where that stands. And then we're going to get into a discussion about the intersection concepts. And so they've changed a little bit since you last saw them, and we look forward to telling you how they've evolved since that time. And then we'll have some time for discussion and feedback, and then get into the next steps. So I don't know if it makes sense for us to kind of go around the room, and if in the order of this list and just say if you are on, just so that we know, so that Diane can take a good listing of who was participating. So I think that would start with you, Jason, if you wanted to say hello, and Marshall, you're up at the top of the list. Maybe Eleni says hi there too, even though we didn't have her on the list. I apologize, Eleni.
No problem.
Sure, I'll kick things off. I'm Jason Shrest with the CCRPC, and I am the project manager for this project on behalf of the CCRPC. And while I have the mic, Jen, could I suggest that after we go through the introductions as a committee, we see if there's any members of the public who have dialed in that have any comments that they want to get out right at the gate?
That sounds like a great idea.
Hi, this is Nicole Osh. I'm the project manager for the City of Burlington. And also, while I have the mic, I'll make a quick suggestion. Because sometimes it's difficult for people calling in to see who may be speaking. Jen, if you can run through the list of attendees and maybe do a call out that way to catch people that you haven't heard from in the introductions. Okay. Also, just one other housekeeping thing. I don't know if you have a preference for how you'd like to get comments and questions along the way. There is a chat feature here for people that are using the computer, if you'd prefer that, or if you want people to just chime in.
We could do either. I'm okay with if people want to chime in and interrupt, that's completely fine. Or Drew will be monitoring the chat feature. If anybody wants to chat, that's fine too. So however you're most comfortable with, I agree.
Okay, thank you. And I also want to thank everybody for being willing to give this a try in light of these new circumstances. So this is the first test run for us, and hopefully this goes well tonight.
Yeah, and I'm excited with how much participation we're getting. That's absolutely wonderful. It's a good sign. Diane, do you want to say hello? You're next on the slide. Oh, we have a new message.
That's from me. Just letting.
Sorry, I'm here. It's Diane. Hi. Just a little technical difficulty.
Sure, no problem at all. And that's why we're getting used to it now. This is our opportunity to try it out. So I'm Jen Conley. I'm the project manager from VHB, and I'm happy you guys are helping us try this out for our maiden voyage of an interactive meeting online.
Yeah, I'm Drew Gingras here with VHB as well, the lead design engineer on the project.
And Karen Sentoff, also here with VHB.
Kids are getting sick.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
All right, I am Will Clavel with Burlington's Community and Economic Development Office.
Thanks, Will. And Ashley might not have signed back on yet. Hopefully she's able to reconnect.
Hi, this is Lonnie Raven. I'm representing UVM today. Jim Barr couldn't make it.
Great, thank you for being here, Lonnie.
Hi, this is Chris Damiani from Green Mountain Transit.
Hi, Chris. Thank you.
Hi, this is Jason Stuffel with the Burlington Walk Bike Council.
Hi, Jason.
Good evening. This is Mario Spinizzo with UVM.
Hi, Mario. Sounds like you have another demand, someone demanding your attention.
Somebody is.
Hi, this is Dave Cawley. I'm the Ward 1 NPA representative to the committee.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, Sharon Bushner, City Council rep.
Hi, Sharon. Do we have anybody else who is not on the list? Any members of the public that dialed in just to participate and hear what we're talking about?
Hi everyone, this is Jack Hansen. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm the East District City Councilor and I'm an alternate on the committee.
Welcome, Jack. Ashley, have you been able to get back on? Not yet. Anybody else logging on that hasn't been on our list?
So I did announce myself. This is Eleni Churchill. So.
Hi, and this again is Marshall Distel, assisting Jason Charest from CCRPC.
Thank you both for participating. I don't want to move forward without Ashley, though, since I know she was just trying to log back on. We're not seeing her. Well, maybe we get started, and if Ashley needs further discussion, we can speak with her offline after we're done. The next couple of slides are the project purpose and need. And we can read through this. I think what's more important than necessarily just what's on these 2 pages, we're also going to be circulating to the entire group the full text of the purpose and need. We received a number of comments. Again, we really appreciate all of the feedback that we got on the purpose and need. It was very helpful, but there are folks that are obviously representing different viewpoints, and in some places we had some hard decisions to make about how to handle things. One of those things that I do want to call your attention to is around the issue of parking. We do, obviously, it's something we did decide that is, it's a part of the study name, and it is something that is important to the corridor. And how we address that or how we talk about it is something that, we've even internally among this group had a fair amount of discussion on. And so really look forward to your comments on it. We've tweaked what the language originally said, but want to make sure that we're getting to where we need to get. Oh, and looks like Ashley's joining us. Fabulous. So I don't know, we can just run through really quickly that the project purpose, the purpose of the Colchester Avenue bikeways, parking, and intersection safety study is to identify and prioritize improvements along Colchester Avenue in its entirety, which will enhance mobility and safety for all modes and support parking demand by businesses, employers, and residents. And also at the intersection of Colchester Avenue and East Avenue, which will improve safety for all modes of transportation. And I know one of those changes was to stress all modes rather than just focusing on bikes. We definitely got that comment. But then there is some discussion about that supporting parking demand versus, what is it we really want to do with parking, and does that really capture what it is we were trying to do?
And I'll just chime in really quickly. The other feedback that we got that we have sort of been internally discussing and hoping to get some guidance from the advisory committee on is injecting a little bit of a vision in the project purpose. So we got some feedback and some language around sort of having more of a vision statement in the project purpose that's sort of guiding this process. So certainly we want eyes on that element as well. So both sort of the parking language and how to approach that in a way that makes sense, and then also sort of a vision for the corridor and integrating that element into the project purpose.
Why don't you just read that first blurb to capture that?
So we got some feedback, and the way we tried to incorporate it here is the purpose of the Colchester Avenue bikeways, parking, and intersection safety study is to identify and prioritize improvements that align with the city's vision for sustainable transportation infrastructure and enable a continuous, connected, multimodal transportation corridor. And then goes on to say, specifically, the study will evaluate improvements along the entirety of Colchester Avenue and at the intersection of Colchester Avenue and East Avenue. But we wanted to just get some feedback from this group on sort of integrating that vision piece into the project purpose. So we will be circulating the full language of this after the meeting, so folks can sort of give us what their thoughts are and sort of guide that finalization of the project purpose and need.
And again, I will say, because I opened up all of the emails we received that had feedback, and we did receive a lot of feedback and a lot of input on this, and we appreciate it. And we tried with this revised purpose to try to hit on a lot of those points. So, and just briefly, the next slide is the project needs, which I don't think have really changed much. It's improving intersection safety, improving corridor safety for all users, enhancing mobility for bicyclists, and then solutions for parking demand of local businesses, employers, and residents. And unless anyone wants to weigh in with any feedback immediately, we're happy to take that now, or it might be better when you have a little time and have it in front of you. But if anyone wants to weigh in now, we're certainly happy to hear.
This is Dave Cawley. I appreciate the inclusion of the vision elements to the purpose statement. I think that helps us get a better handle on it. One of the questions I had, and it may be bigger than we can deal with right now, but to me there's a question about the time frame, meaning the improvements that we're making to this corridor, how long will they be in place for? Is it something that's good for a year, 5 years, 10 years? I haven't heard any sense of time regarding improvements, so I'll leave that as a comment.
Okay. Anyone else?
Could I just ask a clarification with regard to Dave's question? With regard to time, are you talking about once some sort of improvement is implemented, the lifespan of the improvement, or are you asking the time in which it will take to build the improvement?
It's the lifespan of the improvement. Helps me to think, when we think about vision and we think about what we're trying to create, the question is it near-term improvements or is it long-term improvements? And it's not really, I don't think we've talked about that yet as a team.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Karen.
All right, so when thinking about the concepts to carry forward through this process, I know the last time we all met, we had brought to you all some cross-sections, some ideas to sort of get a sense of what elements we wanted to see along the corridor in particular. And so, the first couple of concepts that you see on the screen now were sort of the elements that we had discussed and the layouts that we had discussed for the corridor, sort of segment by segment. And I think it's important that we sort of share with this group and talk through the fact that we, after that meeting, came back and sort of generated a few other concepts or ideas that we wanted to at least evaluate from a high level and get a sense of if it, we were hearing a lot of feedback from the group, see if those elements would work along the corridor. And so we sort of landed at these generally 6 concepts that we discussed with the project team here and the folks at the CCRPC and at the city, just to see sort of carry it through the next step of the process and see if some of the things that we were calling for in that meeting and the feedback we were hearing were concepts that would work so that we could land at alternatives that really, to carry through the full process, land at alternatives that had sort of the elements that everyone was calling for. So here you see concept 1 we discussed last time, maintain curb to curb. So the idea of sort of holding the curb where it is today and implementing elements that try to meet that purpose and need along the corridor. Concept 2 of separated bike lanes, both directions in both directions within the curb. That is a concept that we are carrying forward, so you'll see that again in this discussion. Concept 3,
hold on, there.
Looking at some sort of shared use path on both sides. That was a concept that we had discussed at the last meeting. Concept 4 and then 4A, which you'll see later on, that's why it's bolded here. Raised and separated bike lanes in both directions. And then we have a version of that where we've done some enhancements to create a little more green space, some bus pull-offs, some parking where possible. So sort of getting at that balancing impacts to, sort of back of sidewalk and beyond with some of the elements that folks are calling for in terms of more green space, more, transit accessibility, more space for parking. And then concept 5, a two-way cycle track. We did at a high level evaluate an option of having a two-way cycle track along the corridor. I think ultimately we decided that the contraflow, especially with a steep grade section like the hill down into Winooski, it was really challenging to find a safe way to implement a two-way cycle track. But, we did have a pretty lengthy discussion about that as an option. And I think ultimately decided not to carry that forward as an alternative through this process. But definitely wanted to highlight that we had taken a look at it and really tried to see if it would work for this corridor. And then concept 6, which we'll see again, shared use path on the uphill section and separated bike infrastructure on the downhill section. So sort of the slower speed folks going uphill and mixing potentially with pedestrians. And then at speed, getting them their own space. So the bolded concepts are the ones we're going to carry forward through this process, and the elements that you'll see in the next handful of slides. And hopefully the bulk of our discussion today, we're hoping to get as much feedback from you all as possible on the elements and the layouts and sort of the design ideas that we're carrying forward, so that we can enhance or alter these as this group sort of guides us through, so that we can hopefully bring them to the public in some way, shape, or form. So again, you're going to see for the corridor concepts, concept 2, concept 4, concept 4A, which is that raised separated bike lanes concept with some of those other enhancements, transit, parking, etc. And then the concept 6, the shared use paths concept. What we've done to look at the alternatives for the East Avenue intersection is that we have coupled the intersection alternatives with one of the corridor concepts, but I think it's very important to note that any one of these intersection alternatives could be coupled reasonably with any one of the corridor concepts. So the way we've coupled them here was really just so that we can visualize the corridor as a whole corridor with some sort of intersection change, some sort of intersection alternative. But that's not to say that concept 2 has to be coupled with alternative 1 at the East Ave intersection. It's really just a way of sharing that information and having 4 whole corridors that we could bring forward and share with you all. But important to keep in the back of our minds that we can sort of plug and play any one of these in any one of these concepts with each corridor option. So we're going to start here with concept 4 and alternative 2 for the intersection. And like the last time, we're going to sort of bring you along, starting from Prospect Street and making our way east towards Winooski along the corridor. So we have the corridor broken up into 5 segments, making a pause at the East Avenue intersection to look at that alternative more closely. But what The plan here, I think, is to just talk through some of the design elements that we've implemented along the corridor, and then hopefully get as much feedback from you all as possible. Hopefully Drew and Jen are both going to chime in and help guide us through what we've implemented thus far for the corridor. And just to orient you really quickly, what you're seeing on the screen, so the aerial image in the background with the sort of yellowish, tannish filled sections are sidewalk or pedestrian space mostly. In some cases where we have the wider sections of a shared use path, we're maintaining that, in this case, 10-foot wide shared use path. So you see that sort of highlighted in that yellowish tannish color. And then the dark gray fill is along the bike infrastructure. So that was just a way to sort of highlight where we're anticipating PEDs will be, where we're anticipating bikes will be in this particular option. And so, starting from Prospect and moving towards the hospital entrance, you see that 10-foot shared use path on the south side that we're maintaining essentially where it's proposed to be when construction starts this summer. Maintaining along this section basically where the sidewalk exists today. But then the major changes here are we're bringing the curb in pretty significantly along this segment and have a raised and separated bike lane.
They can make it full screen. You have an option, whoever's asking that question, to make it bigger by choosing that something make it full screen. It's usually up at the top center, but I'm not sure if you can zoom in at all.
I'm not sure that I can, maybe.
Oh, good. But either way, at home you can do it as well by, it's like use full screen or display to full screen, something to that, so that it cuts some of the border that you lose around the edges.
So along this segment, we're really with the width we have, we're able to maintain the sort of sidewalk and shared use path where they exist today. And then the big change is that we're bringing in the curb from the current location. So the travel way for vehicles is actually a bit tighter. And in that additional space behind the curb, we're adding in a separated and raised bike lane. So you'll see that it tends to be adjacent to the shared use path on the south side. The idea there is that it would be, a small curb that would vertically separate the two, so you would have that distinction, and then the pavement surface treatments would definitely be different. So in a lot of places, you'll see, an asphalt pavement for the bike lane, and then maybe a 2-inch or 3-inch vertical separation up to a concrete, in this case on the south side, shared use path, or concrete 5-foot sidewalk on the north side.
One over just so they can see the rest of the sheet.
Sort of bring you along here. And then some of the elements that we were adding in, definitely looking to accommodate both bikes and PEDs at the intersections. So at the intersection of Mansfield, we're anticipating a shared use path on the east side of Mansfield Avenue. So, being able to accommodate both bikes and PEDs across Colchester Avenue at that intersection, giving the bikes an opportunity to get into the bike infrastructure from that intersection. So if you're coming off of Mansfield and making a left, you have a way to get onto the bike lane eastbound. and similar treatments at the medical center driveway, sharing the crossings, both bikes and peds, making sure that both are accommodated, allowing folks on the westbound bike lane to be able to make that left into the hospital entrance.
And if I could just weigh in, I took a look at the operations of this intersection. This intersection is already operating near or at capacity currently, and there is housing development, residential units that are proposed on the north side of the intersection. The issue is that even with the current signal timing, which only has 10 seconds of lost time for advanced sight for pedestrians to cross prior to the UVM Medical Center Drive getting the green, it already is experiencing problems. So there is going to be a little bit of an impact to capacity for vehicles at this intersection in order to be able to accommodate all of the crossings that we are showing here and ensuring that the bikes and the peds get to cross safely. This was definitely a hot spot for bike and ped crashes in the analysis that we looked at. So it definitely is something that we want to make sure that we're providing as much of a protected crossing as we can. That said, it will not be an exclusive crossing, but we want to make sure we include advanced and somewhat protected movements however we can. But I want to be frank, because that's true in all of the alternatives, that this location is definitely a challenge. I bet you have to make it.
Yeah, I'm trying to navigate how to actually do that. Okay. Sorry for the delay. All right, so moving east.
I have a question. Just to be clear, will the bike lanes be raised on both sides of the street in this scenario?
Yes.
That's the intention on this one, yes.
Yeah, and maybe just to give some visuals, so, you know, your typical 6 or 7 inch curb reveal from, you know, the edge of the vehicle's travel lane, and in this case, along this segment, a 6-foot green belt, so we can accommodate some street trees in that width, and then at sort of that height of your typical green belt would be that bike lane. So, you know, at the same vertical height as your green belt today, essentially.
Hi, this is Chris Damiani from Green Mountain Transit. I was also just wondering if in future drawings for this, if we could overlay the GMT bus stops on there just to make it a little bit easier to see where those potential conflict points are.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And one other thing, I think I sent this after our last meeting, but it'd be great to potentially see if we could have some sort of, you know, it's great that the bike lanes are going to be raised, but also include some sort of conflict markings where those bus stops are on the bike path.
Yep, good comment. Thank you.
All right, so
Sorry, I have a question. What is the width of the travel lanes in this alternative?
so travel lanes up against the curb, I think we decided the guidance from the city was 11 feet.
Okay.
And then the shared left turn and left turn pockets, I believe, are 10 in this case.
Okay. Do you have it somewhere? Like, do we have a schematic that has all the dimensions so we can see? It's kind of hard to judge now.
We can prepare that because we had developed those previously for the alternatives, and we can certainly do it for these new alternatives as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So continuing.
All right,
on,
so continuing eastward, we had heard that, you know, the mid-block crossing right rapid flashing beacon at Fletcher Place has been a success. And so building off of that element, adding in, a left-hand turning movement for the bikes to share that crossing with the PEDs, getting folks onto Trinity campus and into that neighborhood a little more easily from the bike infrastructure in this case. Continuing along the corridor.
Worth mentioning here, the alignment is a little different with the right turn lane. Instead of it being folks kind of end up in the right turn lane here, it's really the roadway realigns eastbound so that you are making a conscious choice to get into that right turn lane.
And then approaching the intersection, in this alternative, we're looking at keeping the bike lane to the south of that right turn lane and then accommodating the bikes via a signal. So this would be instead of, bikes having to mingle with traffic and get into a through lane to continue eastward. In this case, they would stay to the south of those right-hand turning movement vehicles and be accommodated at the signal. So they would have to stop and go according to their own signal heads, most likely.
Drew, do you want to comment on how the bikes are making the left turns here?
Yeah, address another comment.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, so Lonnie, I am in the midst of answering your question, but yeah, just as we'll kind of reflect back on the first advisory committee meeting and the public committee meeting, the public meeting, we had a number of comments about left turning cyclists, and so we've kind of instituted along the way here either a bike box treatment or a two-stage left turn box treatment dependent upon the intersection. So for instance, in this case at East Ave, for a westbound cyclist along Colchester Avenue is looking to travel along East Ave, we've kind of shifted the bike lane and the sidewalk, as well as you'll notice the UVM drive in this case, so it's a 90-degree four-way intersection. We've shifted the bike lane and the sidewalk north a touch to create space for that two-stage left turn box. So what would happen is a bike traveling west along this facility would kind of queue in that box in front of traffic that would be coming out of that driveway. And obviously we'd seek to put some sort of bicycle detection. That's kind of a further down the road detail, but the bike would then wait for that driveway signal to be green. And then as soon as it does, it would be in front of the vehicles queued and would then be able to travel southbound onto East Avenue. And you'll notice, for instance, back at the UVM driveway, we went with UVM Med Center, we went with a bike box treatment as well as along Mansfield Ave. So you'll see kind of those two different treatments alternating as we go along the corridor.
And that's just more of a centered look at that intersection with the realignment.
Excuse me, with the realignment for UVM, do you know anything about the infrastructure underground?
We do not. Yeah, the exact alignment would have to be developed once there was actual, survey and some of those details are determined. Because truly, in this concept, as you can see, we didn't realign East Avenue that significantly, and truly, the alignment of it could shift either further to the west or stay closer to where it's currently located to the east. So there is the possibility that it could be realigned far enough to the west that it would be over the driveway that currently is a stub, but is currently already a driveway to the north. So there's a number of options here for how, when finally it goes to get surveyed and goes to construction, there's a number of ways that this intersection could be aligned, but obviously the goal is to make it a standard four-way intersection because that is the best operationally for everyone.
Thank you. I have another question about the heights differential between the sidewalk and the bike path. Is there precedent and for a 2 or 3 inch differential? Like, I'm just thinking, is there a safety problem with such a small difference? Will people trip or bikes, kind of bang into it?
So generally, Lonnie, that's kind of a further down the line. When there is a selected alternative and we get into preliminary engineering, that's where we really sort out those kind of niche grading details. But the precedent in this case is generally some amount of separation, typically 6 to 8 inches if we are doing a raised bike lane adjacent to a sidewalk with what's called a beveled curve. So it wouldn't be a harsh kind of 90-degree bump up to it, because to your point, that would create a hazard for cyclists and potentially pedestrians. But generally, it's kind of a, that 2 inches or 3 inches is covered over kind of 6 to 8 inches of horizontal distance.
Thank you very much. That answers a big concern of mine.
Yeah, for sure.
And it is important just to separate the two users and to provide some difference between them that helps keep people in their lane, basically.
I think it would be helpful to show other precedents, other places where that kind of little mini ramp or graded change works well.
Okay.
There are some good examples to point to. So to your point, I think it would make sense to show maybe 1 or 2 of those when we bring these elements to the public.
That's a great idea.
Hey everyone, this is Jack. Just jumping in. I think Copenhagen is an awesome example of, they use this throughout the city, that style.
Yep. Thanks, Jeff.
All right, so continuing along the corridor on concept 4 here.
A question just before we leave East Ave. Can you describe the changes happening on the, I guess that would be the northbound side of East Ave at the intersection? Are there any changes?
On
East Ave as you're heading north towards Colchester Ave?
Oh, East Ave. No, I mean, here we're just showing a slight realignment, and one of the things that we did do is eliminate kind of that first parking area. It's not a significant change.
And what that does is it gives us a little more queuing space for those right-hand turning vehicles. So we're able to accommodate that movement a little bit better by eliminating, I think it's essentially 1 parking spot close to the intersection there.
Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? This is Sharon Busher.
Yes.
We can, yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So there's actually more than 1 parking space, because those were put in place, I think there are at least 2, when the India House first went there to accommodate their sort of drop off and pick up. And I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 hours. I don't remember the amount of the limit on it. Certainly not easy to enforce, because, who's going to be checking how long people park there. But it's more than 1 space. So are you eliminating all of those spaces that have a sign saying 1 hour or whatever?
I believe, was it a total of 3 spaces? Because there's 2 up close to the intersection, and I think 1 further back. We can confirm that, though.
Yeah, I see. I would say at most it appears two spaces would be removed in this particular concept to create more queuing space for that right turn only lane.
Okay. So 2 spaces. Okay. All right. I just wanted to understand that better. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this alternative at the East Ave intersection before we move eastward? Okay. we will see the East Ave intersection again, so we can always come back to it. So here we have, again, just some side streets where you can see the sort of shared markings, bikes crossing at the bike lane, sidewalk, crosswalks. That's a typical treatment. The other thing I want to highlight on these side streets is that the intention directly across from these streets is to give folks the opportunity to get into and out of the bike infrastructure, but not necessarily formally accommodate a crossing of Colchester Avenue. So if you were a westbound cyclist here wanting to make a left into Latham Court, you could get through with a curb cut and make that left essentially when, you know, there's no traffic coming. But, you know, we wanted to accommodate getting folks into and out of the infrastructure, but with lots of caution and not formalizing those low volume crossings at some of these locations. And I think you'll see a little bit more of this as we move eastward and these neighborhood streets come up a lot. Well, zoom in so we can
just maybe highlight it's more of the same, but any place that it changes or there's a pinch point, anything to call attention to?
Yep. Same typical cross section. In this case, we were able to gain a little bit more of a green belt, so we could do potentially some street trees in a more significant green belt on the south side along this stretch. And then as we approach the curve, we're really limited by the topography here, with, you know, the steep embankment up to the cemetery on one side and sort of the tight topography on the north side. So we did hug the existing back of sidewalk along this section, which is why you sort of see everything come into the edge of the travelway here. So we're pretty limited without doing a lot of earthwork to sort of widen this section out and change the existing topography. And that's pretty consistent across the concepts. So that's just something to keep in mind along this section.
A question about parking in this section. Is parking being eliminated in this section of Colchester Ave?
In this alternative, it is, yes.
Yes, with this concept, we are looking to add in the bike mobility enhancements, you know, make sure we have some streetscape elements. But yes, we've eliminated parking in this particular concept.
All of it?
In this alternative, yes.
And just a reminder that
And
in this stretch, there's currently no parking.
Yes, so in the last slide, there is existing parking along this stretch that we would be eliminating in this concept. In the next slide, the parking has already been removed as part of the last project along the corridor. And again,
hi, this is Jason Stuffle. Hi, this is Jason Stuffle. I was wondering if I could ask a question. I couldn't quite hear, but is this all within the existing backer curb to backer curb along this section? And if it's not, where is it maybe being expanded into the neighborhood properties?
Well, actually, in this section, you can tell if you look to the left of your screen, in some places it's actually within even the front of curb of the sidewalk. You can see it's not even going as far as the back of curb. But to the east, I believe it is, Karen, is it by just a couple of feet? It's going outside the existing back of curb.
So in this concept, we tried really hard to maintain back of sidewalk. And in most places we were able to do that. There were 1 or 2 feet of impacts in a couple of locations. And sort of across the board, we've attempted to maintain for places where cars are parked in front of houses, like what you're seeing sort of to the right of the screen here, maintaining storage length of 1 vehicle at least if there are impacts to those properties.
Karen, can you go back?
Yeah, I'm particularly. Yeah, I was actually interested in one slide before, but also this one as well, because I kind of represent a lot of the neighborhood people, and I want to know what the impacts are to all these houses here and the people's properties. To be clear, so it's marked maybe on the map, or it's people can tell what's going to happen.
Yeah. So in this alternative, Jason, to that point, the most impact is 1 to 2 feet from the existing back of sidewalk.
Okay, that's good to know, but also it would be great to know like which actual properties are impacted as well.
Okay. We can highlight that for your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And just know all of this is within the right-of-way. However, the right-of-way actually extends a fair amount further than what we are showing being used. Currently, there are a number of folks who park within the city right-of-way. So although we're going to go a foot or two into that space, that does not mean we're going outside of the city's right-of-way. We're just going into a space that, folks have been using, and we're conscious of that because, like on your screen in the upper right-hand corner, there's a house there that someone has parked in their driveway that if we took 5 feet away, they would no longer be able to park in that driveway. So we are very conscious of that, even if they are parking within the public right-of-way. The right-of-way at some places does touch the front of some buildings. So it is definitely a concern that we've kept in mind.
Thank you very much for that. I know it's a sensitive subject for people who live in the neighborhood, so thank you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Jason, did you have something? You had started.
Yeah, I just thought it might illustrate your point about how far you're encroaching beyond, the back of sidewalk. With the previous slide, there's that one house that has like 3 or 4 cars on the ortho.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have much room. If you took 5 or 6 feet, they wouldn't be able to park their cars there anymore. And I guess when I was looking at your drawing, it looked like, I think that's like just east of Nash Place. Is that the road?
Yep.
Like those 4 cars that are
that
there.
is my neighbor. That's
right.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was going to say they almost currently encroach on the sidewalk. If there's like a large pickup truck there, the room is barely enough to even get it from preventing it going into the sidewalk. So they would definitely lose all those spots there. And that's what I'm saying. It's a sensitive subject for people along this corridor, and it's a lot of the houses like that.
But I don't think we went any closer at that house. We'll call attention to. That was one of the houses that we were watching our impacts at because we know how close they are, in that they use that space. So we'll call attention to which areas we went outside of the existing back of sidewalk, and we'll let you know that.
Yeah, and
Can I just add something? As far as that house, the city actually, that's parking in their front yard, which normally wouldn't be allowed, but the city negotiated a deal with them when code enforcement was first started to allow those 4 spaces. So I don't know if that's documented anywhere, but I do know that was more of a formal process for that property. I just want to give you that FYI.
Yeah, thank you. I don't think there was something legally drawn up because I think they would have found it in the right-of-way research, but we could certainly, we'll keep that in mind. Again, I don't think at that property we're widening whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's an issue, but we certainly will keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I guess it's just important to note, maintaining that 3-foot green belt along this stretch on the north side is sort of the balance to keep that back a sidewalk along this stretch. So, you get a narrower green belt than maybe something that could have more of a streetscape element, but minimizing the impacts to the neighbors is definitely the name of the game along here.
So the maximum impact we're anticipating in this alternative is 1 to 2 feet, correct?
Yes.
Nicole asked if we think any locations would impact available off-street parking.
No, we stayed away from any location like this, so it should not, as I said, I don't think that location, I don't think the ones further down the hill that are parking people that are right out by the edge of sidewalk. I think we purposefully at those locations moved the alignment. That is a change from when we came before you last. When we first came, we basically just did an offset kind of from the center of the road and laid things out. This is a little more finessed so that we've moved things around depending on where those most significant impacts would be and have tried to avoid those impacts. But we can be responsive to what Jason had asked and provide information as to which properties that impact will be at.
Yep. All right, and then I guess the last thing to highlight in the hill section here, just again, getting making the most of the rapid flashing beacon along this section at Chase Street, and allowing both bikes and peds to jump in and have that protected movement across Colchester Avenue along here. I guess the other thing to note along this section is that the lanes are wider because we've included a shoulder in thinking about emergency services. These lanes are 10.5-foot lanes with a 2.5-foot shoulder, so that if emergency services do need to get through here, folks can pull over and stagger and be able to get an ambulance or a fire truck through reasonably. So the curb to curb is a little bit wider than if we were looking to do some serious traffic calming and make people feel squeezed, but we're very conscious of the fact that the medical center is at the top of the hill and that this is a busy thoroughfare for those vehicles. So just a note from a design perspective.
Thank you. And I just want to note, if I could, this is Ashley. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. That most of our ambulances, we tell them to use exit 14 and come into the hospital from that direction. So the majority of ambulances that would be coming up Colchester Avenue are actually very, the local ambulances that are responding to the Winooski neighborhoods and the Burlington neighborhoods in this area. So thank you very much for keeping that in mind.
No problem. Okay. So that's it for this alternative.
All right. So we're going to take a look at essentially concept 4, but then with a number of enhancements. So I think we'll cruise through this one a little bit quicker. You're going to see essentially the same design elements along the corridor, but we've been strategic in selecting a handful of locations where we felt like the balance between minimizing the impacts and having some of these other elements like better bus accommodations, better opportunity for parking, some of these other pieces we've incorporated. So just to give you a sense of those pieces and where we think they might fit. So along this section again, same treatment, We're able to get those nice wide streetscape green belts, so we can have street trees or what we sort of decide in terms of aesthetics along this section. And similar treatment up to the intersection with East Avenue. In this concept, we're showing the intersection alternative 2A. So on the last one,
just zoom in a little, just so they can really see that. Sorry.
On the last concept and intersection alternative, we were carrying the bikes south of that right-hand turn lane. And in this case, we're bringing the bikes up north of that right-hand turn lane. So bringing them up into, basically allowing them to move with the vehicles through the intersection. So bringing the bike lane up and making that through movement that would be served by the signal sort of as it is today, right, through movement with the vehicles.
So it results in much easier to understand signal infrastructure. The one thing I would point out, though, because it was the thing that I think folks have trouble with currently, is how does the cyclist who is in that lane coming from, say, the UVM Medical Center and then has to find a way to fade over to get into the through lane against cars that are trying to fade to the right to take a right-hand turn. And so on the left side of your screen where you see the bike lane, above that is actually a hard curb. So we see this as a hard curb encouraging the cars to shift to the left, and while it protects the cyclist, and then the cyclist then kind of pops out and is right next to the vehicles. It properly aligns them to where they need to be, and then the right turners would then, you know, cross over into the right turn lane. And again, it just makes it easier at the signal. The cyclist would get a green ball with the cars for the through movement instead of creating the conflict that the other alternative creates, where you have right turning vehicles and then cyclists who are trying to go through, and you have to then treat them very separately. You cannot have that right turn maneuver traveling at the same time as the through movement.
Hi, so this is Jason Stuffle again. So I'd like to say that, I'd just like to say this replicates that same feel through this area that I currently feel, that I'm stuck between two cars going fast with no protection, and they often switch lanes there. So I really don't like the feel of that. I don't know maybe what the best alternative is, but that's the same sort of feel through there that is currently very unnerving as a bicyclist.
Okay. Ashley?
Yes, I had a question back towards the UVM Medical Center entrance. Is that an island with a curb in the middle there? Or is that just, oh, okay. We're one lane over. Gotcha.
Yes.
Never mind.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
That's okay. So that's the end. I'd say that's really the only difference here at the East Ave intersection. But if you move on to the next, you'll start to see some of the enhancements that we're talking about.
Oh, sorry. So along this section, there is currently a bus shelter on the north side. So the idea here would be a bus pullout. You know, we're in a section that doesn't have that shared left turn lane or the left turn pockets and additional width. So we're sort of limited by width. So giving the buses a place to get over and vehicles, allowing vehicles to pass, and also giving lots of curb space for potentially another bus shelter or, you know, a place to wait safely for transit service. So one place where that may be an opportunity to implement an element like that. And along this section, opportunities to potentially implement a little bit of access management here, limiting what is currently 2 drives out of Centennial, to one, to again give some space, in this case for parking. The idea here was to get a couple of parking spaces as close to Campus Kitchen as we possibly could. Without having real significant impacts to properties. These properties happen to be the closest and partially into the right-of-way, according to our line work. So, limiting that impact as best we could, but, conscious of the fact that there's a demand for parking in that particular location. So getting that parking pocket as close as we could to that business. And then again, sort of trying to balance the impacts to properties and the need for parking or another bus bump out. This is another location. One of our issues that was identified early on in this project is the bus stop at this location. And so, better accommodating that through having a bus bump out. So in this case, this could fit 4 parked vehicles or a bus transit bump out. So those were a few locations where we saw some opportunities to do that. Again, this concept gets squeezed along the curve based on topography, and then down along the hill, we've bumped out the bike lane and the sidewalk a bit just to get the additional greenbelt space so that is wide enough to, again, implement some streetscape elements, some street trees potentially. So thinking about, balancing impacts of, where the back of sidewalk would land and getting sort of the streetscape elements that we want to have along the corridor.
We just received a message from Jack. Is anyone else not seeing the presentation? He seems to be having just seeing a loading screen at this time. Anybody else experiencing?
The computer bumped me out. This is Sharon Busher. The computer bumped me out a while ago, and I tried to get back in, and I just gave up. I'm just following with the printed pages that I had, the handout that you gave. So, yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Netflix is overloading the system.
I'm sure you're right. There are a lot of people at home online.
This is Jason Stuffle. I'm seeing it fine on my end at least. So.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And Dave Cawley, it's working for me fine.
Okay, so we'll keep reading along. If you are just looking at a printed version or at the PDF that we sent around, and if you get lost or if you think you've fallen behind, please just speak up, and we can either slow down or try to orient you where we are in the show, what slide we're on.
Yep. Yeah, and so I think we're just wrapping up on slide 19 now, just to give folks some sense of where we are at in the slide deck. All right. So concept 6 has shared use paths on basically the west end and the east end. So we'll take a look at that. And then the alternative that we'll see along with this corridor concept at the intersection of East Ave is a roundabout. And so here we're able to still accommodate, and what we're showing here is the raised, sorry about that, oh, moving the wrong way, clicking the wrong buttons, showing the raised and separated bike lanes, maintaining the 10-foot shared use path along this section, so very similar to what we've seen in concept 4 and 4A. Through this section, and then as we approach the East Ave intersection,
Why don't you go to the next slide? And Drew, why don't you talk a little bit about how you took the concept from the quarter study, or was it from the Plan BTV, and how you then laid this out to make sure it was engineered correctly?
Yeah, so just as kind of like a previous reference point, there was in the Plan BTV, there was a roundabout concept done for this. The one difference between that and then what you see here is truly that that incorporated two-way cycle tracks, and this obviously being built into these concepts where really considering just one-way separated bike lanes on both sides of the road. This kind of incorporates those. So just to give everybody a quick overview, and I assume everybody generally knows how roundabouts work, but one of kind of the key design issues with a roundabout at this location, and obviously with, to address the purpose and the need of the project, is to try and safely incorporate, how a bicyclist and or a pedestrian would traverse the intersection if it were to be a roundabout. And so what we have shown kind of set back from each leg of the roundabout are pedestrian and bicycle crossings, using kind of that high visibility bike lane green for the crossing for cyclists, and then standard ladder crosswalk markings for the pedestrians. What that setback does from the roundabout is really allow a vehicle, whether it be entering or exiting, to have enough time to see and react to those modes that would be crossing the particular leg of the roundabout before or after a vehicle is entering and exiting. And so generally speaking, what we've shown here is a minimum of a 20-foot setback for that bike crossing if a vehicle is to be exiting the roundabout. So they do have time to see a crossing bike and yield to that, or a crossing pedestrian at those locations. I don't know, I assume there might be a question or two about this if people want to fire away here.
Yes. Do you have any data on safety for this option for the cyclists and pedestrians?
In general, for roundabouts, I mean, in general, I can just speak about safety of roundabouts. In general, is that unlike a signalized intersection, traffic tends to move a little slower, so that when there are crashes, they tend to be at a lower speed, which we know for a pedestrian or a cyclist, the lower the speed, the more likely that you will survive the crash. And, that's definitely been widely proven, but I don't know, Drew, do you have any other statistics specifically? Not in the sense of comparing bicyclist movements at a roundabout. I will say, like, a design like this is not terribly common quite yet in the United States. It is kind of the standard elsewhere, and I know Copenhagen likes to be mentioned a lot among this group. I mean, these types of roundabouts are very common in places like Copenhagen and the Netherlands. They work there. Obviously, there's a significantly different car culture there than here. So off the cuff, I don't necessarily have any statistics. This would be a new condition for obviously for this area, and wherever these are getting installed, they are generally new in the States. So they are being researched anywhere there's implementing these. This design here follows national guidance published by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, which puts out the most nationally recognized design guide for separated bike lane design, and they include this kind of intersection concept for roundabouts. So we can look into a little bit more into the research they did for those, but I imagine, generally speaking, that they did kind of look to the designs that have worked elsewhere. And I will also say, obviously, if you were to implement kind of a newer idea like this, there would be a lot of signage, there would be a lot of warning in advance, there would be a large education campaign before something like this opened, just to ensure that all the users would be safe.
How big is this roundabout?
Can I weigh in on this?
How big is the roundabout?
Sorry, yeah, I'll respond to Lenny's question. The roundabout here, the inscribed diameter of this roundabout is 110 feet.
Okay, and what are the right-of-way impacts at this point? I mean, I see that there are impacts on the southwest and the north.
Yep, so there are actually no right-of-way impacts to the southeast corner, but there would be impacts to the northeast, northwest, and southwest corners. The right-of-way generally comes to a bit from the back of sidewalk, so it's really at the kind of at the turns into the roundabout that we see those those major impacts. Obviously, this again is showing a potential relocation of the drive for UVM.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
The nice thing for UVM, and I've seen this actually, Bennington College is pushing to get a roundabout at their entry. It does provide a nice grand entrance into a campus. It does, then basically one leg of the roundabout is the entrance to the campus. So it is definitely a nice arrival feature. It is something, although it would be an impact to the right of way, it is something worth mentioning that it's a better sense of place. Yes.
I had a question
Can I
about
weigh in on this? Excuse me. Can I weigh in on the roundabout?
Sure.
BED has a substation off of East Avenue, and they bring huge trucks with huge pieces of equipment. So I don't know what the experience is with a roundabout with these big trucks and how they can navigate the roundabout. And then my other question is, although the ambulances do go, are told to go up from Main Street, Williston Road, Main Street to the into the direct feed into the hospital, a number of ambulances come down East Avenue and then navigate. So ambulances and the buses that transport the all of the employees. What's the experience with larger buses and ambulances and then big equipment on roundabouts?
I would say that was the strongest, this alternative had the strongest reaction from the ambulance community as a negative.
Yeah, so generally roundabouts certainly do get the strongest reaction. So I'll start with Sharon's question. So this roundabout has been designed to accommodate all large truck turning movements for a WB40 truck, which is a tractor trailer truck. What you're kind of seeing and what doesn't necessarily come through in the drawing though is the smaller circle in the middle would be a raised island, but then the circle outside of that represents a mountable apron. And so a truck up to even larger than a W40, we don't anticipate any WV62s utilizing this corridor for travel, but even a truck of that magnitude would be able to navigate this roundabout, so there would be no concern for BED and their trucks making any turns within this. The ambulance question, we did look at turning movements for an ambulance through this at speed. And we did do a little research into, obviously the impacts that roundabouts have on emergency vehicle access, given obviously the proximity of UVM Medical Center. And we assessed kind of a turning movement path through here. And what we evaluated was an ambulance would be able to traverse through the roundabout without needing to mount the apron at a speed up to about 10 or 11 miles per hour. And what we did also see elsewhere in response to areas that did implement roundabouts in proximity with a medical center or a hospital was that in some cases, because there's generally not a queue at a roundabout, that the medical facilities actually found better operations for their vehicles through a roundabout because there's not queued cars, there's not jammed up lanes that are looking to navigate out. One of the pros of a roundabout is it allows constant free flow. And so from the research that we did to look into this idea, we did see actually improved operations for emergency vehicles for this. However, we absolutely can understand because of the hesitancy of this being placed so close to the medical center.
And we knew because it was raised earlier that would be a concern, and we wanted to make sure that the ambulance path could drive through this intersection without either having to stop or having to mount the curb. And so that's why it was critical that it could maintain a constant speed of 10 miles an hour through the intersection.
Okay, thank you. I'll bring back that feedback.
I had a question about the signals for pedestrian and bikes. Can you describe those?
So there would not be signals in these locations. These would be unsignalized crossings, which are kind of the status quo for a roundabout. One of the kind of, if not the purest attribute of a roundabout is a yield condition all around, and that includes to vehicles and to pedestrians and bicyclists, generally speaking. So these would be unsignalized, but on the plus side, high visibility crossings because there are no kind of vertical elements impeding sight lines for vehicles entering a roundabout.
Thank you. And also, have you been able to analyze what happens to the flow of traffic, compared to the existing condition?
We have. We actually found that the operations of the roundabout are very similar to the operations of a signalized intersection when we looked at a 20-year time horizon. No matter what, for some of your critical movements, like your westbound left turn, it's in conflict, and then your, say, northbound left turn, those movements would be a poor level of service and have long delays the same way in a signalized intersection as those approaches would be reaching capacity in the roundabout. We actually found very similar operations when we look at those future analyses.
But overall, I'm hearing that it's going to be about the same. It doesn't
about the same. Those same movements that create a problem still create a problem.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So what are the advantages of the roundabout?
At a high level, roundabouts tend to be a safer alternative for an intersection treatment. So we're reducing the number of places at which two vehicles can conflict, and at the same time also reducing the exposure of, in this case, pedestrians and bicyclists. So, peds and bikes are only crossing one lane of traffic at a time, with refuge in between, crossing the paths of any vehicles, with the exception of the lower volume entrance to the Trinity campus there, where there's not really a refuge point mid-block there. But at a very high level, they are the safer alternative to an intersection treatment, especially these single lane roundabouts.
So I'm assuming.
I was going to ask, would it be safe to assume that off-peak we might see, cars traveling the street wouldn't have to wait for the lights? That would be a benefit in the roundabouts?
Yes,
absolutely.
That is true.
Off-peak operations would be significantly improved.
Right, because all the vehicles would keep moving and just yield to each other. That is correct.
So I'm assuming that the median that you're showing on the west side of the roundabout, it's not raised, correct?
It is just right at the crossing.
Yeah.
Just right at the crossing, it's raised.
Right.
So,
Otherwise, it's a striped median. Yeah.
okay, all right.
Okay.
All right. So moving along the corridor, and I guess, I should pause here and just note that, so the treatment here in terms of the corridor concept, we're looking at implementing the raised separated bike lane on the south side, adjacent to the sidewalk like we've seen in the previous concepts, but on the north side, implementing a shared use path, a side path. And so the idea here, as we move eastward, is that those uphill cyclists will be moving at a slow rate of speed. And so, having mixing with pedestrians may be an okay alternative here. And so we wanted to take a look at what that would look like from an impacts perspective, and evaluate that option. So you're going to see the shared use path continue along the corridor.
Before you move along, Jason just raised, and it's a good point to make when we get into a conversation about safety. This is a designated high crash location.
Yes.
And that's part of why we were looking at this intersection in the study overall, was to try to improve safety at this location. So yeah, it's an important point to make.
Absolutely.
So please continue along. Okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. So again, here you're going to see that shared use path along this segment continue on the north side, and then similar treatment on the south side to what we've seen in the previous concepts. And I think that impact, again, similar to the previous concepts, for maintaining that back of sidewalk, or 1 to 2 feet beyond back of sidewalk, so we're able to keep that the impacts to the adjacent properties as minimized as we possibly can, while having the slightly wider travel way to accommodate any emergency vehicles navigating through here. And again, we have to squeeze based on the topography at the curve section, so we're up to the curb with the shared use path along that section. But then along the hill section, the idea here being the treatment, is accommodating bicyclists at a high rate of speed going downhill in the eastbound direction, and then the slower moving cyclists mixing with pedestrians in the westbound direction. All right, and so the last corridor concept
is one you've seen before.
Yes, it is one that we had brought to this group previously, but have laid out in some more detail here, and we've coupled that with an alternative for the intersection that really is just an update to the equipment, mostly per the Highway Safety Improvement Program evaluation and recommendations, and then restriping the intersection. So making some lower impact improvements at the intersection.
So we can probably move through that pretty quickly.
Yes. So here you're seeing again the sidewalk in that tannish yellowish color, and then the bike infrastructure is actually within the curb, so it's at the same level as the travelways for vehicles. So, the dark lines that you're seeing here represent curb, and then just inside of that curb is that bike infrastructure, still highlighted in the gray color there, so it sort of pops out so you can see where the bike lanes actually exist. And then it's a 3-foot buffer between the vehicle traffic and the bikes. And, yet to be determined what the vertical element we would want to implement would be along the corridor, but the idea with that 3-foot buffer is that there would be some sort of a vertical delineator along the corridor in locations where we're able to do that, and it's not interfering with driveways or side streets. So there would be a vertical protection, but this would all be sort of at the same vertical height, both bikes and vehicles, and then obviously sidewalk back behind the curb, and some green belt. And so, treatments at the intersections look quite similar to what we had seen in concept 4, carried through, accommodating those left-hand turning movements as best we can, piggybacking on existing crosswalks and features.
We just have a question from Nicole that I figured it'll be good to share with the group. So Nicole just was seeking out clarification, not within existing curb lines, but at street level instead of raised, correct?
Yes. And I think that what I think of as the key difference between this alternative and other alternatives is really the placement of the buffer, because the bike lane could stay at street level. It actually even could be raised. I think more the thing that's different between this concept and the other concept is that there isn't a buffer outside of it between, like there isn't a 3-foot grass strip it's where the grass strip falls is really the significant, and we could talk about how each of the spaces are differentiated. But this was the the version that had basically the cyclists closest to the traffic.
Yeah. So, and I guess the other piece to this is that unlike the previous concepts that we were showing where, we've created a vertical separation between bikes and peds and vehicles, in this case, we're sort of creating a horizontal separation between vehicles and bikes, and then a horizontal and vertical separation between bikes and peds. So like Jen was saying, sort of where that buffer exists gets shifted in this concept compared to the previous concepts. And we do gain in this concept the separation between bikes and peds that's a little more delineated. But then in some places where we have lots of driveways, we may not be able to gain that sort of vertical separation that we might want to have to protect cyclists. So that's sort of the trade-off there, I think.
Nicole is asking, and it is a good point to make, that this alternative does have the least impact to the existing green belt in any existing trees. Because for the most part, it's putting the bike lane kind of where it is in the current condition.
Yes, with moving the curb back a bit from existing,
Not
from
exactly,
existing
but,
place.
but right, it would have the
placement.
least
Yep.
impact, yes.
And so again, carrying those treatments through the intersections,
excuse me,
making sure that it's clear where bikes and peds are crossing, piggybacking on the rapid flashing beacon for the bike movement. And then again, as we approach the intersection, bringing the bike lane over north of the right-hand turn movement here. So, protecting to some degree the bike up to the point that the right turning lane starts, and then, getting the bikes over to match the through movement with the vehicles so they can be served by the signal sort of as it exists today with upgraded equipment. But generally, essentially the same as existing curb lines and features more or less at the intersection. So it's the very low impact change to the intersection in this treatment. I'll just click over so we can zoom in. The intersection. So bikes being served in the eastbound direction by updated signal heads, but moves with the vehicles. And just seeing if there's any other elements to call out here. I think that's about it. Carrying that through. And again, in this concept, this is a section that currently has some parking on the south side. So in this concept, we're attempting to maintain that back of sidewalk, low impact to the adjacent properties through this pretty tight segment. And in doing so, are eliminating the parking that exists today.
Eliminating all parking, did you say?
On-street parking, yes. And just to give you a sense of how that looks on the hill section, again, maintaining that 3-foot buffer between the travelway and the bike along the full corridor, making sure that they're accommodated crossing all the side streets. but nothing too significant to note otherwise along this segment. So before we, oh, go ahead.
Well, can I ask a question since I haven't been able to see a lot of the presentation? Can you just recap for me when you're talking about segments with the alternatives, when you have this you have the chart at the end that talks about parking for concept 2, this is Colchester Avenue corridor, concept 4, 4A, etc. And you say reduction, and then on one of them you say maintain some, and then the other says reduction. When you say reduction, do you mean elimination of all parking? I guess that's what I really don't understand.
No, you are correct. That should say elimination. And those other alternatives, we are showing it as an elimination. Now, that said, okay.
When you say elimination, you're saying, can you tell me where you're saying where you're starting to eliminate it? Are you starting the elimination at the intersection of East Avenue down to where the cemetery is? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, because that's the only place in the corridor that there is on-street parking on Colchester Ave at this time. So yes.
No, I understand that. I just want to make sure I understand the segment. And so then, can I ask this is another question. I did have to leave, and I apologize, everyone. I had to leave for about 15 minutes, so forgive me. So I heard you talk about, with one alternative, you talked about the parking that is in close proximity to the campus kitchen and maybe making accommodation for some parking there. But for Kathy's Flowers, and we're not going that far down to Domino's, we're not going that far down the street. That's why I was asking for this clarification. But for Kathy's Flowers, there would be the parking on Latham, but there'd be no parking. There's one space, I think, now in front of her store. So that wouldn't be there, is what I understand. And then, so Campus Kitchen would have no parking in front of their store. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. I'm stepping off the council, but I'm not stepping out of this community. And, I really am concerned about the fact that we are not supporting small businesses, which we help to create. And I also very well know that small businesses cannot be sustained by just the neighborhood. It really can't be. So I'm very worried about this. I really am. And I've tried really hard to find alternatives to parking for residents and small businesses. And it's been really difficult, and I haven't been successful, even though I've tried everything I've known and contacted people I know, even UVM, but UVM has a parking shortage, and Lonnie can speak to that. So I'm really concerned about what our thought process is here. I really am. And I think that if people are going to lose those stores, so I guess that's it. But then people are going to have to travel farther, and we lose the convenience and the whole neighborhood quality. And we have the India House that we wanted to find something that would work in the neighborhood. But once again, the neighborhood is not going to be able to sustain a business by in and of itself. So I'm really concerned about this.
Understood. So there are a few things. There's a few comments. One is India House's location right on a high crash location intersection creates a unique problem. It is very difficult. It limits sight lines, and it causes problems right at that location. So that really is a special case that I don't think we're going to be able to address. The other thing is, and a comment came up by Nicole about a good point. If the advisory board really, feels strongly that another concept makes sense outside of concept 4/4A, in that parking is something we should attempt to find or provide in one of those other concepts. We can certainly attempt to do so, but it does come at a cost. You've heard earlier in the call that there are houses that are currently parking within the city right-of-way. Now, that is the city right-of-way, and if we wanted to put on-street parking in front of their houses, we could, but obviously those people would feel very affected by that. There is also then the loss of any buffer. So it does change then the experience for a cyclist or a pedestrian if they're right in the midst of on-street parking. You know, it certainly is something that we can look at, but we're trying to balance the needs of all of those things. It's, you know, the folks who still want to park in the city right of way in front of their property and their driveway. It's the providing enough room for the cyclist, enough room for the sidewalk, and attempting where we can. I just cannot say that we'll be able to provide parking in front of Campus Kitchen. I don't think that that is, you know, a promise we can make, but could we try to do some parking bump outs in limited areas in the other concepts? Certainly. But it kind of depends what concept we go towards, and then we can try to fit the parking in that concept.
Yeah, and I guess I'll just add in that part of the reason we wanted to carry forward a concept like 4A is to show those elements and be able to show you all and the public, you know, there is opportunity along the corridor if we're willing to, you know, have a bike lane that wiggles in and out quite a bit, or, you know, have sidewalks that are now encroaching on what folks, you know, currently think of as their front yard. We can fit in all of the elements that we're calling for along this corridor. So, you know, along this stretch that I'm showing on the screen now, which is looking at concept 4A from Campus Kitchen down to the cemetery, you know, we tried to show those parking bump outs and the bus bump outs as a way to show, you know, we can add those features in and are cognizant of those concerns, and, you know, finding the strategic locations to strike that balance between the impacts to properties and accommodating, you know, some on-street parking and some better transit service is something that we want to do and want guidance from, particularly from this group and from the public on where are the most strategic places to be doing that.
And I'll piggyback.
Hi, this is.
Can I just say one other thing? I'm sorry. I think that UVM, I really hope that the city and UVM can have a really good conversation about collectively. I think we could help each other and the residents and the businesses here. And I'm hoping that that could provide some relief, and so we could get a corridor that's safe and still accommodate some of the needs that are going to be eliminated. That's it. That's
Hi,
all
this is Jason. Thank you, Sharon. This is Jason Stuffle. I'd just like to say that I like to see some actual study done into the amount of on and off street parking, public and private, and a real management about like zone parking in the neighborhood. We talk about eliminating parking or doing whatever with it, but I haven't seen real data onto what exists in the area and how it could be creatively managed. And so I'd like to see that, more data on that. Thank you.
Say that I know that Jim Barr and UVM in general is interested in working with all the neighbors and stakeholders, and that has been done in the past. But yes, it's a tough situation, and there's not a lot of room, and there's a lot of needs.
I will say that UVM Medical Center has committed in the past, since we took over the 195 Colchester Avenue property adjacent to India Avenue. After business hours, we do allow for residents and patrons of the India House to park in that parking lot, after business hours. So that's an option as well to be considered that we would likely continue. But if it was something that was including lunch, we wouldn't be able to accommodate that likely.
Hey everyone, this is Will Clavel here. Just want to, reiterate some of the points already made. I've been working with businesses on the corridor, going back to the India House my first week at CEDO, and there are a lot of parking concerns. I'm all for the protected bike lanes. I think that's a direction we need to be moving in. I've had great conversations with Jim Barr and Jason Williams about finding alternative parking off the street. But I know a lot of people on the steering committee have a vision for what kind of businesses they would like to see in the area. And as we look to attract those businesses, parking continues to be a concern for potential tenants moving into the former India House. So something that I look forward to continuing to working with the medical center and UVM on. I think we can find solutions off the street, but this is a recurring issue for businesses on the corridor, so something that work needs to be done.
Okay. Did you want to say something?
This is Dave Cawley here. A question, has there been any preliminary discussion with the owners of Campus Kitchen, regarding, this scenario of 4A shifting their parking in this manner? Do we have any feedback from them at this point?
No.
I'm curious that it might be worthwhile to have some discussion with them even before going to a public meeting, because I know they're going to be very sensitive to the issues, but because you've made an attempt to accommodate some of their parking, I think they'd be interested in knowing what that scenario looks like before it hits the public. So whether we can go over and share it with them, or you might want to do that, but however it would be best to try to get them in the loop on this.
Yeah, thanks, Dave, for that suggestion. And I think I would tend to agree.
Okay, so if we want to move on, the next couple of slides are a preliminary alternative evaluation. There is a lot of information provided there. One of the things that we tried to do was to color code, because we obviously had our purpose and need in mind when we developed these concepts, and you folks have helped us refine them. Most everything shows up green. The darker green is a bigger improvement than the lighter green, just to kind of show some gradation there. We can go through things one by one. The items that are not shaded at all are because there's very little change across. There's either no impact or there's very little difference between the alternatives. So instead of really coloring the whole thing and having some of it be lost, we kind of just wanted to have it be more easily for the things that are big improvements jumping out at you. We could go through it one by one. I think some of this is stuff that's going to need to be digested, though, by the advisory committee. So this would be one of those things I would like to assign as homework that folks take a look at and provide feedback, because this is our team's perspective as to what is really good and what isn't as good in the different, and so there certainly are different perspectives on that. So we would welcome impacts, and it's completely true what Sharon's comment about it isn't a reduction of parking on some of those, it is elimination as shown. But for the public meeting, perhaps we'll remember then to talk about that, and that some of those bump outs may be able to be added to those other concepts. One other thing that came up was the question about maintaining the green belt of the street trees, and that might be under aesthetics, or perhaps we should add another line for that, because alternative 2 that is an advantage of alternative 2. I don't think it goes quite as far with bike infrastructure as it could, but it does have the advantage of keeping more of that green belt, which is something that I think needs to hit our evaluation. So I think we really would welcome if there are other things like that you think we're not hitting on in these alternative evaluations. We would welcome that input.
Can you note how many parking spaces are eliminated in each concept?
Sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I would just say based on the City Hall Park, that trees and loss of trees and green space will be a hot topic, and it would probably be good to get ahead of.
Okay, yep. And thank you for that feedback, and we will certainly add that discussion. I will say for most of these alternatives, though, because we are relocating where the green belt will be, it would be the elimination of the trees that are out there, but in some locations we'd be able to put them back. But we certainly can provide kind of the gradations of what that impact is in a similar form of dark, light green, or red, or light red, I suppose. Yeah.
And I guess it's worth saying with.
Is there any tree, oops, sorry. Is there any tree of real significant size? I think that would be where people would really, you know, it's one thing to eliminate a smaller sapling size, but if it's a really big tree, people are more, understand the value of that and understand that a replacement is going to take a generation before it's even has any significance.
I know at our last meeting, we did get into some of that discussion, and I believe Jason had mentioned a couple of trees right near his house that were very significant size. So we are aware of a few of those on the corridor. If folks want to call our attention to any, we appreciate it. Otherwise, we can do a little bit of investigation into that ourselves.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, this is Jason Suffel. So I would definitely say 316 Colchester Avenue, and then in front of Green Mountain Cemetery, there's some significant trees that people would care about. Just real quick feedback. I didn't see any improvement to the University Place intersection. The lefts off of that and the lefts onto that road are pretty erratic, given how close they are to the other major intersection. And also there's kind of an offset sidewalk that if you actually want to continue down the green, you have to walk up University Place a few feet and then walk across, and that's a fairly unsettling walking experience. I would just say take an opportunity to look at the Campus Kitchen crosswalk and see if we maybe might realign that on the western side of that, because most of the traffic actually comes from Trinity campus and people don't actually walk all the way down to there. So that was just my feedback points, but thank you.
Okay. Yeah, University Place was, okay. Nope, that's great.
And we did look at University Place. I think some of the struggle that we had internally, so that you all know, is that University Place is the next Great Streets project, and so we don't really have a sense yet of what is going to be implemented along that stretch. And so depending on the sort of multimodal corridor that it's proposed to be, it felt a little premature to carry forward some real recommendations in this effort, given that that's a big unknown in a separate effort. So
to not know what it is we need to connect to.
Yeah, that will be, it's a big question mark, and certainly has effects in this corridor, and is a point that we looked at and ultimately decided internally not to carry more significant crossings or changing the layout as it currently is, knowing that there's going to be some likely big change for that connection.
May I just say something while he's here? But UVM has that, is responsible because the city worked with UVM as far as infrastructure dollars, and so UVM really is, although DPW has taken the lead, UVM is really partnering for the renovations of that street. But it's important, since Jason mentioned that, to make sure the connectivity of the sidewalks make sense. So at least that could be highlighted and passed on. Nicole's here, so will be involved in that. So at least that piece of information can go forward. I think Jason's very spot on to mention that. So thank you.
Yeah, I can confirm. I mean, UVM is working with the city on that, on University Place.
Right.
And if there's any, recommendations from this study to the University Place study, then I think it would be appropriate to have those as recommendations, or, because you're doing work. And this, the Colchester Avenue is first in line. So I think it's appropriate to make recommendations if you have any.
Right. The issue is the location of University Place is very closely located to intersections to the west and to the east. And it is tough for us to make a recommendation not knowing what type of, say, bike facility is going to be proposed on that street. And so we're not quite sure how to connect into it. One of the things that when we were talking about concepts that we thought about, that someone who was coming down could potentially, if you're a cyclist and you're in the westbound lane, you could possibly cross at Mansfield, and then if it's a shared use path and allows two-way traffic, then you could cycle to University Place to still make that connection into University Place in the short term until we're certain that a direct connection, until we don't know if a direct connection is going to be made. And what, like I said, what that facility would be on University Place. But we don't want our study, whatever concept we move forward, we want to make sure that those westbound cyclists can get there. We don't want a one-way facility for that block. If, that means a cyclist is not going to be able to make that left turn at Mansfield and connect in, where we'll try to accommodate so that at least the cyclist has an option until whatever they do comes to be. We know it's happening, and we're kind of keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, I can confirm that that intersection is really tricky for cyclists going either way, in all four directions, in and out.
And I think it's additionally.
So any help you can.
Yeah, understood.
I was just going to add that, it's particularly challenging because I think it probably makes the most sense from a north-south connection as a cyclist to Colchester Ave. So, it adds to the challenge that it's grade-wise probably the most ideal connection. Being a cyclist and having navigated that a number of times.
So I know we are right up against our 8 o'clock time. I think we've gotten a lot of feedback. We do want to leave you with these draft evaluations to take a look at again and provide us with feedback. We also will be looking for your input on purpose and need. Do we want to say within the next couple of weeks to get some of that feedback, after which we'll start preparing for what we hope will be a public meeting at some point, and we can talk about as our communications, either as online options advance or as everyone gets a little healthier and we can get together in person, we'll figure out when that date is going to be. But we would really appreciate your input so that we can, kind of refine and move forward with this presentation for the public.
Excuse me, I'm going to need to obviously talk to other people at UVM about this to get recommendations. And I'm wondering if you can send a preliminary alternative evaluation that includes the extra information we asked about trees and how many cars eliminated or parking spaces eliminated or reduced. And then I can shop it around, then I can show people.
We can certainly do that.
And
Thank
Jason has proposed feedback by Friday, April 3rd. So that would be next Friday? So two Fridays from tomorrow, if that would potentially work for people, about 2 weeks out.
Well, I think after Lonnie's statement or request, I think I would retract that.
Why don't you give us a week to make some revisions, and then we'll circulate so that everybody has kind of our full updated evaluation, and then we can give 2 weeks after that.
That's what I was going to say, 2 weeks after whenever you guys are able to make those revisions.
April 10th.
Yep.
That's fine, thank you.
And it would be great if we get some dimensions on the plans too, so we understand.
Sure, we can do the
Absolutely.
cross sections, that's fine.
Cross sections would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I had a question about sharing any of this information. Last time I think we talked about it and we said it was okay to share the presentation that we had at the January meeting. Is this information shareable that you have presented to us today?
I believe it is already on the website, so anyone can access it if they're interested. So it is ready to be shared. I think maybe we should label it draft because we are going to be making some changes to it.
That would be great. And regarding the campus kitchen question, would you like to, would your team like to approach Campus Kitchen, or would you like somebody from the neighborhood to talk with them in advance?
Why don't you let the project team powwow on that, and maybe we'll reach back out to this committee to see if we need help with that.
Great, thank you.
Committee, can Will Clavell be involved in that conversation?
I'm happy to be involved in that, Sharon.
Thank you, but I think it's really important to get Tito involved. Thank you.
So yeah, expect an update from us on all of these matters and updated materials within about a week's time. Great. Well, thank you so much. I know it was a lot of material. Thank you for having patience, and thank you again for figuring out how to log on. I think this was a new experience for all of us, and I'm excited that between the chat and microphones, we were able to have some lively conversation back and forth. I really appreciate it. I guess it's a little after 8. We can get back to our families now. Diane, did you want to weigh in on something?
Yes, do you mind? I just wanted to ask that the advisory committee hold on to that April 30th date in case we want to use it for some kind of meeting, if that's okay.
I think that's a great idea, Diane.
We don't know what's going to happen, and I know everyone could come, so I hate to let it go.
I completely agree. Why don't we hold that date? Whatever we use it for, let's hold it for now.
Thanks.
All right, everybody got that? Everyone's got that still on their calendars, the April 30th date?
What time on the 30th?
I would assume we'd say 6 o'clock, just because that's what's worked for us so far.
Yep, 6 to 8.
Great. All right, everyone stay healthy then in the meantime.
All right, well, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so
all.
much.
Thank you.
Very good.
Be well.
Thank you. Be well, indeed. All right. Let's see.
Thank you all.
Are you guys still there?
We're just determining how to stop the recording.
We don't want to lose it by mistake, you know.
Oh, gotcha. Well, I just wanted to say I thought it went really well, all things considered. I thought we had